Yeah, we are recording. So the first part is mainly introductions, anyways. So we can
that's
sort of start with the talking about the agenda here and introductions. So this is LiGO administrative training, and so we're going to be covering. This is going to be general administrative training, and we can focus in on some specific groups, but the idea today is to mainly cover an overview of some of the administrative capabilities. So we'll be going through adding users, modifying the vehicles, how to personalize LiGO, so you can make your own workspace. We'll look at the groupings, so you can, we already have predefined groups, but you can also create your own subgroups within your department for your vehicles, if you want certain users to be able to see just certain vehicles within your group. We'll also be covering modifying, adding event rules, and then also adding and modifying some of the reports. I believe you've already covered creating geofences and point of interest, but we can get into that a little bit more detail if you have questions, or if you didn't fully cover that in the user training. So just in terms of introductions, my name is Rhett Harman. I'm doing the admin training today. We also have Jay on the line, and he did the end user training, so he's here as well. Good. Jay, you're on the line, right?
Good morning, everybody.
And then I believe Elizabeth's going to join in a little bit as well. So I'll pass it over to the team. I'm assuming we're going to have representatives from each group from King County.
Hi, I'm Donna Buzar. I'm the project manager for this project. And if we could, just speak up on those on the phone. Please just speak up and introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Cindy Sattler. I'm with Transit Data Management.
This is Larry Swartzler. With Data Management.
This is Scott Wong from DOT Roads.
Hi, Lisa Huntley from Solid Waste Division.
Tyrone Ward from DOT Roads.
Nora from Fleet, and Casey is furiously trying to log in after his update. So he'll be here soon.
So I believe there's Kathy and Mike are on the line as well. I don't know if maybe they don't have speakers, but I see them on the online session here.
Can you not hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, Kathy. You're good.
I can hear you.
Kathy's from Parks, and then if it's the mic I'm thinking of, he's from the sheriff's office. There's a lot of mics.
Okay.
Totally.
Someone's got a. Okay. Casey just joined. So can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the objectives for today is to show you how to add new users within your group, modify the users, so you can come in. If you've already got users, you can rename it. You can also change passwords and various things, delete users if for example, they've left. So The other thing is being able to update perhaps some information on your specific vehicle, maybe the actual name or description, or adding custom fields onto the vehicle if you want to be able to put additional information on the vehicles themselves. Also be able to personalize the interface. So in other words, you can create your own workspace if you like things rearranged or in a specific look and feel. You can create your own. You can add columns to the interface and then save it. Also how to group, again, show you how to group your users or group your vehicles, and how do you do that with tags, roles, and views. And then we'll go through in a little bit more detail on events. We'll go through and actually create some events and show you how to edit existing events and how those are tied to reports. So we'll go through and add and modify some reports and manage your reports within your system. And then again, lastly, we'll learn some the geofences and points of interest. And Jay, did you cover points of interest or geofence? I know you covered geofences, but did you cover points of interest?
Yes, I covered both briefly during the user training.
Okay, so we can leave that session if you want. If after towards the end, if you're wanting more details, I can provide additional detailed training on that if you like.
And I just have a question. I have a question for you, Rhett, before you continue. On the geofences and points of interest, is that something that the administrators can create and other users of the system can then see?
Correct. Yes. So, and you can also set permissions for who sees those. So you can, in other words, you can create a geofence as an administrator and then decide who sees it based on permissions. And so we can, when we look at adding users, I'll show you where that's set up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's the same with reports as well. So you can decide who sees certain reports and who doesn't see the reports. So I believe the last training you were using was the KC Train. Eventually, you're going to be provided your usernames, which your username, depending on who you are, you have administrative roles, and then there's also operator roles, meaning there's users underneath that in your group that just have sort of view only. But if you have that a role as an administrator, when you log in, you'll see your group and be able to modify those or do any kind of administrative sort of capabilities within your group. So I believe Donna and Nora are going to provide those usernames at some point to you. So I know this was covered in the end user training, but I just wanted to, since we're going to be talking about the interface a little bit and changing your workspace, I did want to briefly cover this again. Again, you have your vehicle list over here, and again, depending on your group or your department, if you're in roads versus solid waste, you may be just seeing your particular vehicles in the list. And those are associated with vehicles on the map. And then you have these tabs, tracks and track points. And the tracks are your linear tracks, and then your track points are your individual records or breadcrumbs. And then you can, based on what you select over here, you can also see those tracks on the map as well. And then you have access. You can. So
could we have everyone mute their phones, please?
All right. So We got some feedback here. Give me just a second. I'm gonna see if I can mute, figure out who that is and mute the phone there. Okay. So in the you have a variety of menus, drop downs. So in terms of permissions, you can decide on if any of those menus you want to remove for your end users. So your users of your group, you can turn those menus off, as well as down to individual tools, to tabs, so that the interface, everything that's on the interface has permissions that you can set and define what is seen by the users. So within these drop downs, you can also, there are specific items that you can turn off within the drop down as well. So so you have a map toolbar. So on the map toolbar, you can also turn off individual tools if you don't want specific users to use the tools. You have down in the lower corner, you have your events, which we'll be covering today, and your geofence tabs down below. And
Hey, just a moment. So Tracy, I see that we're getting some feedback from your connection. So could you mute your phone?
Okay.
Thank you.
So any of these tabs can also be dragged and moved to different locations. So as I mentioned, if you want to change your interface, you can actually grab, if you prefer this information on the left and the map on the right, if you want to move tabs over, you can just drag and drop them. So the interface itself is configurable. And if Jay covered points of interest, for example, when he was on site, that's hidden over here in the left-hand side of the interface. It's actually hidden, but you can open it up and then drag. So for example, I know a lot of people like to have a point of interest right down by the geofences, so you can drag that down and then move it down below here, for example. And then again, we're going to cover the workspaces in a little bit more detail here. And then you have your views. So your views are essentially groupings of vehicles. So right now we have, for each department, you have your own view set up, but you can create subviews within your department. So if for example, let's just say, let's take transit. If within transit you want to group some of those vehicles by maybe specific functions, you can create different views within that group to be able to, one, set permissions for those, but also filter those down quickly where you can just go between a view, and then whatever view that you have brings in your list of vehicles over here, as well as any reports or events or anything that are going on are all related to that specific view. Okay, so adding and modifying users, and we're going to cover modifying vehicles now. So if you have the permissions to do this, there's an Add New User button in the upper right. It's right next, it's on the Vehicles tab. And again, you can decide if users have this capability, you can actually just turn off that permission and this button will go away. But when you click the Add New User, it brings up the first thing. It's like a wizard that walks you through the process. So you want to be sure if you're actually adding a new user, they have to be considered an operator. So an operator is someone that's actually logging in to LiGO, and then you fill in the next step. It's a wizard that walks you through. You fill in the details. So the details, the username is actually the name that they're logging into. So if it's first initial of the first name, full last name, that's this username. You can enter the password. The name is the display names. That's the name that's seen in LiGO. and if you're doing reports on users or anything like that, that's this name right here. And then, of course, you can fill out other information, phone number, description. You can add custom fields. The other key thing is the email address. So if you want any of your users to, say, receive reports automatically, for example, you want to add their email address so that they can receive automatic reports based on the email that's set up. So that's the first one is this user type, then details, and then the next step is the roles. So the role under right now, everyone in this training is considered an administrator of your group. So for example, there's a fleet administrator, there's a transit administrator, there's a roads administrator, and then underneath those roles, there's basically operator or more of a view-only role would be your users. So, and we'll see that here in a minute, the different roles. But then we can also create additional roles within that. So you're not tied to the specific roles that are here. We can actually create additional roles and define those permissions down even further if you want as well. So the roles really are ways of setting up predefined permissions or revising the permissions for what that group sees and can do in the system. And then the next one is tags. So specifically for users, you tag them so that they fall in a specific users group. And within that users group, you can get maybe reports for that complete group within that, based on that tag. So, and as we'll see when we get into the vehicles, there's also vehicles that have tags as well. So those tags really define sort of the grouping of either the asset or the person that you can do different things like reports or receive notifications and so forth. So after you add a user, you can also modify that user or modify a vehicle, which is the same thing. And if you right-click on either the person's name or the vehicle, it brings this little drop down here, and the thing that you're looking for is this edit user. So again, if you have the permissions to edit an existing user, you click the edit user, and then that allows you to modify information for that user just by right-clicking on the name. Typically, if you're modifying, say, a vehicle, you usually do not want to modify the username. That's sort of the underlying name. You may want to change maybe the descriptive name. That's sort of the display name. Or you want to add some more details in a description, or perhaps you want to add custom fields or additional information down below here. So those are some of the things that you may be doing when you're editing, say, a vehicle, for example. The other thing with editing or modifying perhaps a vehicle is you might want to change either the icon that you see on the map, so the icon being the actual vehicle, what it's displayed looks like. So you may want to categorize your vehicles by colors within your group, so you can change this icon to be able to see those visually. So there's the icon, there's also the color, and the color is related to the track. So in other words, a lot of times what you want to do is tie the vehicle color to the actual track color. So when you redraw the track, you can see it's associated to, say for example, a green vehicle is tied to the green track. But you can modify those and then again categorize those by however you want. Just as a note, you can also create custom. We can add custom icons if you have. There's a library of sort of icons that we have in the system, but we can also add custom icons as well into the system. The other thing that you may want to do with regards to the vehicle is, and this is probably maybe more on the fleet side of when we're installing, but we want to add the odometer value on that. So again, when you right-click on the vehicle, at the bottom of the interface, there's accumulator. So you click accumulator, and this is when you're installing the devices. Essentially, you put in the current odometer value in there, and then it keeps track of the odometer value for reports in the system. And again, we'll take a look at that. But the key thing is you enter the current value. Whatever time you actually installed the unit, you put the date, and then you put the time that you read the odometer in there, and then it will recalculate based on the position of the vehicle. It'll capture that. So along with that, you can also you see some default fields here in your vehicles tab. So for example, name, last seen, track, connection. You can move these columns just by dragging and dropping them. So you can reorder those. You can also just right-click onto the column header and add additional fields that might be important to you. So things maybe such as speed or idling or odometer or other information can be added to this column header, so you can visually see that information again just by right-clicking on the column header here. As well as in the Vehicles tab here, there's also a little drop-down arrow, which you can click the drop-down arrow, and it gives you a lot of additional options, such as being able to add custom fields. So the custom fields can be on the user. So in other words, you can add custom fields on the user. You can also add custom fields onto the vehicle. So if you want to maybe have equipment or other information, you can add the custom fields onto that. And there's a variety of, once you pick that, it gives you a variety of options for different types of field types, whether it be a drop-down box or just a checkbox or just a text field or a numeric field. You pick that, and then you save that. And if you may notice that perhaps the field doesn't show up immediately. You then have to actually go into the user type editor and turn it on. So I did notice that someone did add a custom field, was testing something, but I noticed that it wasn't turned on. So there's sort of a two-step process in that you add the custom field, and then you actually have to go in and turn the field on so it's visible to others by going to the user type editor here. And I'll go through that here in a demo here shortly. Oh, here we are. Okay, so I'm going to pop over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the actual user's view. So if you notice here, I've got a variety of views. I'm going to go to the user's view, and I'm going to add a new user. So again, up in the upper right-hand corner here, got this new user, and it's going to pop up this window here. Again, the key thing, if you're adding someone that's a user that's going to log into the system, you need to make sure you pick the operator user type. So, and just while I'm here, I'll mention all the vehicles are device type. So you want to make sure if you are editing a vehicle that you do not change the you don't change the device type, because that's tied to the device. So just that's something to leave alone with regards to the vehicle itself. But adding a new user is, again, it's specifically an operator. And then you just sort of go through the wizard here. So you can go test 01. We can add a password in here. for example. And again, this is sort of this is the name that's actually used to log in. And then this is the visual name. And then you can decide that all of these things. So the first three are required fields, and you can decide whether they're required or not. But right now, these three are required, and the rest are basically you can add them if you want. And we can set, if you want to have some of these required, you can actually set them as required. But we'll go ahead and go through. So by default, if you notice, it's checked underscore operator here. But, and again, you're going to see, I see everything because I'm sort of a super administrator, but you may just see a few your specific ones. So for example, if you're in roads, you would see road operator. So people that are underneath you that you want to add as users that don't have administrative, you'd basically pick, for example, roads operator or solid waste operator, fleet operator, and those are users that they don't have those administrative rights, but they can log in and see the vehicles and so forth in the system. And then, again, by default tags, we have all users set here as a tag, but you probably would want to add them as a roads user. That way, again, the roads user, you may want to have reports for them. You can also set up a view just for those roads users so that you can manage those as a group. And I can show you how to do that here. So probably want to create again, check as a tag the roads users here. This is optional. If you wanted to actually put a picture in here, you could add a picture for either the user or the vehicle. And go ahead and save that. So now we have a KC test user here down below. And in a little bit, when we start to cover the views and roles, we'll, in more details, we'll come back to this user here. So now if we go, let's just go back to our vehicles here. So let's just, for example, let's pick one of these. And if I right-click on this and I go to Edit User, so perhaps I want to add a description in here. I could put a description in here. And one thing, the nice thing about the more information that you have, either for a user or a vehicle, you can then search by it. So if you're wanting to search by specific equipment, maybe you're in fleet and you're looking for all of the Ford F-150s, you can put, add that information, then just do a search, and then it'll just bring up all of those specific items in there. Or if it's a user as well, you're looking for supervisors or something, you can search by that. So any information that you enter on these, you can search by. So that's one thing that's very helpful there. Just to go back again with regards to, you don't want to change the device, and you also, the role for vehicles is a unit. So those are two key things that are not typically changed, but you would typically maybe change just the description or maybe the marker. So if you wanted to change the icon or change the color of the track itself, so you change this. And then here's the odometer value. So this particular one already has one set up here. But you can just, again, verify that, verify the information. I'll just hit cancel. I believe I saw one of these that didn't have an odometer. So if I go edit user here, and so I'll just show you, if you are, again, installing the device, you want to add odometer, you just put the odometer value here, and then whatever time that you specifically recorded it, even if it was yesterday or last week, as long as you have the date and time, it'll recalculate based on driving here. So you just enter that in and then you click save, and then that's tied to the odometer value there. Let me also show, so these column headers here, so again, you can drag, so if you wanted to move this over, you can just drag and drop it that way to move that over. If I wanted to add additional columns here, I can add the, for example, speed or any other columns into this. And then again, when we cover, we'll cover personalizing in a little bit more detail. The key thing is the workspace. So if you do this sort of right now, and if I was to log out, it would go back to my default the way I had it set. But when we cover workspaces, once you create your workspace, then it's permanently set up that way. And that's the same thing with down here as well. So on track points, you can add there's a lot of data that's being captured and you want to see that information. Same thing, you can right click and add those columns here for the track points as well. And then down this little drop down arrow here, this is where we can manage custom fields. So for example, if we wanted to add the equipment, and you could add a default value or not. We save that. So if you notice right now that, so there it is, there's equipment, you just have to turn that on. And so based on whatever you add there onto, for example, the vehicle, then that information is available there. We can come back in, go manage custom fields, and go ahead and remove that. Okay, so let's go back. So this is now getting into how we personalize the LiGO as well as group users and group vehicles. So workspaces, again, each one of these have permissions. So you as an administrator have more capability to manage workspaces, obviously most people you allow them to do their own workspaces, their own private workspaces, but you can also have, as an administrator, you may be able to basically edit shared workspaces. So within, if you want to, for example, you have a dispatch group that's doing dispatch, you want to create a workspace and then you want to share it with some of your users, you can create those workspaces and then share those, and then you can either have it set up as that's their default workspace. So you have a lot of capabilities in terms of, you know, what the others see, and what if you want to sort of have a group of people that are specifically, they can only see this workspace and this information, you can do that again under Manage Workspace. And the key thing is, once you rearrange things, is you use the Save As here. So you do Save As, and then you can decide whether it's shared or not shared. Some of the other things here too, which we'll cover a little bit, is you can actually uncheck some of the views here. So in this views option, it'll do a little arrow over, and then you can uncheck certain things to be displayed. The other thing is the marker attributes. So marker attributes are actually labels. So you have access to a lot of information that's being captured, and you can actually label vehicles based on certain things that are important to you. Maybe you want to add the driver name to the vehicle as well as the vehicle name, or other things. That just, and again, we'll cover that in a little bit more detail here in a second. So we talked about creating those users earlier, and with roles, again, there's some default roles that are set up. Each department has a administrator, and then they have an operator, like, for example, airport administrator and airport operator. But what you can do within your group is you can make a copy of the role. So in other words, let's say you have an airport operator. The easy way to create is just to create a copy, and it creates that role, just makes a copy of it. And then from there you can filter down or reduce, either add or reduce some of the permissions that role has. So for example, let's say you have a subgroup and you want them to only see certain reports or certain geofences. In this privileges, you can essentially just uncheck information here. And again, we're going to cover this in a little bit more detail, but you can go in and uncheck down to specific tools or specific reports or specific geofences that they have access to within your group. And tags. So tags are a way to basically set up groupings or filtering down by. So in other words, what views you see, what reports you see are based on tags. So we have, for example, all vehicles tag. Then we have tags that are for airports. So again, when we add a new airport vehicle or airport asset, we put the airport tag on there, and then that groups those vehicles by that, and then that automatically goes into for example, an airport view. And the same thing with users. So you have sort of all users, but then you have users within just the airport users. And then you can, again, filter that down even further if you want to. And that allows you to set sort of groupings of reports that they see or groupings of notifications based on those tags. So tags are very, very useful. And then that rolls right into the views. So the views are, again, it only shows specifically what's in that view, and that's related to the tag. So you may have driver view or user's views or vehicle views within your group. And again, you can create subgroups of views as well. Okay, so let me go back here.
Hey, Rhett, it might be useful to briefly describe the difference between a view and a workspace.
Yeah, so workspace is really the whole interface, everything, whereas the view is what basically groupings of information really over here and what's filtered. So for example, if we go to airport view, really it's just filtering down, for example, the airport vehicle, but it's not related to, say, moving things around with the workspace. So, for example, with the workspace, I just double-clicked on the left column here, and I have points of interest. So if I wanted to, say, move this point of interest, I can drag it down here. Now, if you notice, it's red. So as long as it's red, it's not going to allow you to drop it. But as soon as it turns green, I can drop that. Put it right there. Oh. You just have to see as it turns green, it lets you drop it. So then it pops down there. So now I have, and then I can double click, make that go back. So I have now events, geofence, and points of interest. So this isn't related to the view, but it's the workspace that I'm working in, and I want to have, I want to change this specifically for my look and feel. And I also see, so if you notice up here, there's a map tab and there's a dispatch. So I could grab this dispatch as well and move this dispatch over here. And then maybe I want to create say a dispatch sort of view for specific users, making this the default that comes up. So let me go back to my vehicle here. So again, this is a view. All this is dealing with is what's seen, but the workspace is your whole working area and what's visible. And the other thing, so I can, if you're wanting specific columns too, you can change again the columns that are seen here. I can also go over here if I want to remove certain things. So if you notice these views, I can uncheck. Let's say I don't want them to look at track points, so I can uncheck that. So this gives me the ability to remove any of these tabs. And then once I get it to sort of how I like it, I can come up here and go Save As. And then just call this, for example, Dispatch. Now, if I don't check the shared, what this is my own sort of my own workspace. But if I click Share, then I can provide that to others. And again, I can decide. Just by sharing it doesn't necessarily mean they see it until I actually give permissions for them to see it. But I can share this, and then others can actually see it as well. But I can just, for now, just click Share. And then, so now I have in my drop-down here, I've got a dispatch workspace. And again, I can set that as my default. Or as soon as I click back to my regular default, what it's going to do is it's going to revert back to where I was before. So that's sort of the difference between the workspace, is my working view. And you may actually for yourself want to create different workspaces as well for yourself to be able to quickly toggle between an interface that's all set up for certain functions like dispatch, or where you're focused in on specific things that you want to do, like review people's tracks, or you're focused on other things. You can create those sort of workspaces up here by doing that. So, and again, the view is more tied to your grouping. So I go roads, got my roads view. So when you log in as a roads administrator, you're going to be seeing, for example, these vehicles that are tied to this view here. If I go to solid waste, transit, so sort of go between those different views and see, again, the different information. Any questions so far? Sort of the difference between the views and the workspaces? So to actually create for yourself, if you wanted to, for example, create a view, let's just say, okay, let me look at, so earlier I created that user KC test. So if I go to KC test user. So if we look at this user here, right now we got an operator role and there's a roads user role tag. I can create, I'll go up here and I'll show you, I'll create a new tag. So create a tag. So we have tags for your vehicles and users, so solid waste tag, solid waste users. But let's say if I wanted to create a test user tag, and this is all test users. And then all I have to do is can search, and I can pick, that's going to be part of this test user tag. Click Save. So now I've tagged that. And now if I wanted to create a view for the test user, I simply come up here and go Create New View, Test Users. And I can save that. So this could be, you could think of this as either vehicles or it could be users that you're grouping. And so now in my drop-down, I have Test Users View. And so what that's going to show here in a second. Look at that. So, yeah, one of the things is I can see everything, so it's cleared everything out, and now it's just showing the test user. But when you were to log in and as that user, you would just basically see the KC test user. So this is just the concept of you put a tag to it, and then you can create a view called, for example, test user. But it could be it could also be vehicles that you're grouping as well, based on tags and roles. So if we look at roles in a little bit more detail here, so I know we have this guy right now as I think it's roads, a roads operator. So if we go in here and look at this roads operator, perhaps I don't want them to have all the permissions of the roads operator. So, but what I could do here is there's this roads operator role, and I can create a copy of this, just create a copy, and then that'll allow me to modify or create a new sort of role for this. We can call this road subset. So for this, I'm just going to make, so this is going to be for this KC test user. This is I've basically made a copy of the original role setup, and now I'm just going to make this particular user is going to be, I don't want this user to have as much permissions as the roads operator. So then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, this lets me see the permissions that they have, and I can uncheck. I don't want them to do anything at all with exporting. So there's these groupings of information, and it's all tied to what can be seen in the system. So for example, events, what events they can see. This is geocoding, meaning address matching. So that allows them to search by address here. The geofences. So this is where you can allow them to. So if you create a new geofence, you can then uncheck or check what they can see or what they can't see. So for example, if I didn't want them to see go inside, I could uncheck that. So this just allows me to filter down even further what, maybe I don't want them to change anything other than the password. So by default, this is roads view, but I could, I could create a new view and call, again, just allow them to see this test user view. That's the only thing they can see here. Workspaces, as we covered. So again, this is the workspaces. We can set up that they cannot edit shared workspaces. They can't do any managing of columns at all. They can only edit their own private workspace. And then So again, there's a lot of flexibility on, you know, if you want them to view dashboards, down to specific tools. So this area search is this tool that's on the toolbar here. So if I wanted to turn that off so they can't do an area search, I can uncheck that. If I don't want them to do dispatch at all, I can turn that off. These are specific tools on, again, the map coordinates, measurement tool. All these are specific tools or things that you can turn on or off within the system here. And then once you're done, you can save that. And so now that user, when they log in, they're going to have a limited view of compared to the roads operator view, or the roads operator role, I should say. So do you have any questions about the roles or the views or the tags, how those work? Tags are really a way. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Are
Yes.
there any best practices that you would recommend?
So the best practices are already set up in the system in terms of in terms of roles, those are already set up. But that doesn't mean that you can't, you know, it's fairly flexible. So there's sort of by default operators, for example, they primarily can't do any kind of editing, so everything's sort of turned off. But based on your department, you may, you know, you may have, for your group, you may not want them to be doing certain things, like they may not care about doing dispatching at all. So that's cases where you can come in and edit. So as an administrator of, let's say, your KCSO, you can come in, and if you know, for example, that in your department they're not doing specific things, you can turn those off. But they're already set up kind of best practices. But again, you as an administrator of your group may already know your department that they don't do certain things, like maybe they don't do dispatch, or they don't do certain things. So, so anyways, these roles are sort of already set up by sort of best practices, but that doesn't mean that you can't go in and say modify it if there's a certain, like, obviously maintenance is typically that's more related to fleet. So most departments probably won't see this drop down. Only the fleet department will see that, or things that are related to fuel or those sort of things are not set up for most other departments' permissions, but those are set up for fleet because that's sort of that's related to what they're doing with maintenance on the vehicle and that sort of thing. So.
Thank you. And how do you, I couldn't see all the tiny check boxes there, but like some people will want to see the history of engine diagnostics and other people won't, and I don't understand how to see engine diagnostics. Was that one of the check boxes?
Yes. So, and I'm sorry, who's speaking?
This is Lisa from Solid Waste.
Oh, hey, Lisa.
Hi.
So, okay, let's go back in here and let's just take a look again at our let's see, where did my roll go? I'll just pick one. Well, since we're solid waste, I'll pick on solid waste here. So under privileges, there's, if we go down to read data, so there's this read data has, there's this information, but then there's also the message field. So there's read data as the core information, but then you have read messages. And this is where we get down into specific, down into each individual field. So you can decide whether they can or can't see some of this information. And that goes the same with events as well. So there's a lot of different events that are set up here as events. But the core thing is this _read message fields to be able to see values that are coming across there.
Okay, so Rhett, Rhett, just to be clear, so the read message values, that's the list of engine codes that could be thrown, or event codes?
Well, so let me see here, read message. So yeah, and based on what, so we haven't really covered, we haven't dug into the event rules yet, but based on your event rules, additional fields can be set to be displayed based on your event rules. So you may see some core information here, but we could add additional ones based on the event rules that we have set up. So if for example, you don't see,
yeah,
go ahead.
I can't read all of those, but is there a mileage, mileage reading in there somewhere?
Oh, you mean odometer or?
No, how much, mileage, here's, on this trip, or you're just checking in, for service level, has this, has this vehicle gone, 3,000 miles?
So in terms of service level, that's under maintenance, and that's where, so going to, in terms of back to the odometer value, once you have the odometer value set, then, and this is specifically probably fleet related, but you would set up essentially a schedule here, and that could then, you could set your, if it's every 3,000 miles, then it would, based on the schedule you have set up, so we'll just create a quick test. And let's say you want oil change. We're sort of going off here a little bit, but you can pick based on the odometer value every 3,000 miles. And so based on that odometer that we set up in the user or the vehicle earlier, it automatically will get to once, every 3,000 miles, and you can do basically set up who this gets emailed to or SMS, so you can email a user beforehand, and they get notified based on this. So this is sort of keeping track. It keeps track of the vehicles and at certain intervals, and you can create multiple different ones. So you may have some vehicles that are say 3,000, some that are 5,000, and it doesn't necessarily need to be oil change, but it could be air filters or tire rotations or other things. And again, this is primarily for if you're in the fleet maintenance side of things.
Rhett, could Solid Waste Division have that as well? We maintain our own vehicles.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Thank you. Good question, Donna. Thanks.
Just going to discard that. And then I think we could probably do a whole nother training session just on the maintenance, because there's a lot of other things you can do. There's status, import logs, export. So the status can give you, at any given time, you get a visual view of your vehicles and where they are, and it populates this list here. So there's a ton of stuff with the maintenance that we could probably do a whole nother session on, but I know this is supposed to be sort of a general session, so I'm going to pop back here. Vehicles. All right. So now we're going to get into adding and modifying events and adding and modifying reports. So, oops, sorry. So Jay, I don't know how much you covered on the event rules and doing some of the managing reports.
We didn't do anything with creating new events. We did a little bit with creating reports from existing events, but so I didn't do anything with this event rule dialogue at all.
Okay. So this is really, events are essentially the brains. You can do, this is where you're getting all of your reporting, all of your notifications, is all related to events. And this is where you can really do a lot of things based on, so for example, if we're talking about PTO or we're talking about, the solid waste picking up, trash, or we're talking about street sweeping where they're, where they swept, or plowing. This is where you set up the rules to actually display it, one on the map to get reports based on what they're doing. So someone mentioned miles, 3,000 miles in a report. That's all based on these event rules. So one of the reports is trip and idle. So that sort of brings in the trips that the vehicles are doing. It's keeping track. That's an event. And then there's also stops. So those are trip and idle report combines multiple events into one report. So this event rules is a key thing to this system to really get and leverage more information out of this. So just like the roles that we covered earlier and creating users, it's a wizard-based approach for creating events. And so there's this add new event rule up here. You'll see a list of existing events that are already in the system, which we'll talk about a little bit. But this just walks you through creating an event rule, and you name the event rule, and you decide who it applies to. So in your group, and that goes back to, again, when we were talking about those tags. This is where tags is important, because when you set up tags for certain groups of vehicles, that's how you set up event rules for those groups. So you want to sort of define those tags, and then once you have the tags, you can create those rules to the specific sort of filter down group. And then you can schedule it. So you can either say anytime, for example, this event rule happens at any given time, or you can set it up after hours. So if you want to know when vehicles are being used after hours, you can set the schedule to be sort of after, from before 8 a.m. and after 5 p.m. Or you could do it the other way, where you just want to see what's going on during work hours. So that's sort of this number 3 schedule rule activity. And then expressions this is where all of the different options that you can utilize and set up specific things. So for example, there's an expression, just a geofence expression. So there's a lot of different things just with geofences when you pick that. If the top 2 here are the analog expression and the digital expression are most of the events are based on those. So there's, for example, we were talking about things like idling. Those are based on analog expressions. Or when we're talking about capturing broom up, broom down, or plow up, plow down, or those sort of things, those are tied to these expressions up here, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Or speeding expression. So there's specifically one for speeding as well. And then once you pick your expression, then you can set up what type of notification if you want to notify. You don't have to, but the notification is not just, when you think of notification, you think of sending an email to somebody or SMS, but it's actually within the notification, there's a lot of other things. There's a visual notification on the map. There's There's fields that you can add based on, so someone was talking about wanting to see codes or engine codes. So those engine codes are related to here in this notifications section, where you would set it up as an argument, and the argument can then be an additional field that you add on here onto the actual interface. So we'll look in a little bit. I'll show you the DTC event rule, but you can decide sort of, do you want to do certain things in the report? Do you want to show it on the map? Do you want to add additional fields to be displayed based on these event rules? So maintenance reminders and other options here. And then lastly here, besides the notification, there's also presentation. So you can decide whether you want it to be displayed on the map or not. So it really depends on the type of event rule that you're using. Like, for example, the ones that are typically displayed on the map might be idling, where you want to see an icon on the map, or a speeding, you want to see that. But then other things like trips or like every trip, you may not want to visually see that. You just want it in a report or something maybe related to odometers. So it doesn't necessarily need to be presented on the map, because it just might clutter up the map. But there may be key things where you do want to present it in a way on the map. So again, we'll go through that here in a second in more detail. Along with the events, with events you have reports. So every event that you have, you can set up reports and then tie that report to the events. So, and I don't know, Jay, did you cover managed reports at all, or did you just visually?
No, we just touched briefly on what reports were there and how to use them. We did not go into managing reports or changing reports.
Okay. So yeah, so when you manage reports, you can be able to edit existing reports in your list. You can create your own based on basically templates in this report definition. So you'll see some reports in the list, but there's a drop down where you can add additional reports into the system and then basically configure those yourself. And a lot of times what customers use as a template to use is it's called an event rule report. So the event rule report is sort of any events that you set up in the system, you can then leverage that. You can use the event rule template to be able to create reports based on the event. So as I mentioned before, sweeper down or PTO, those are events that are occurring where then you want to create a report, and you can use that event rule report to do that. So, and you can also set up, once you get the reports exactly how you want them, you can set them up on a schedule to be emailed to you automatically. So, so this is sort of a look and feel. And the nice thing about this event report is it's an ad hoc, so it allows you to do ad hoc reports based on a specific time period, who it applies to. You can combine event rules together to create that report. And so we'll get into that in just a second. So
question?
Yes.
Can an event quote report or notification, you said it could also be SMS? So like
that is an option. As a SMS is a notification option.
Okay, I'll let Donna and maybe Casey look into, and Nora, how that would work for us. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what I'll do here is, let's see. So we've got about 20 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you sort of a complete workflow here from start to finish to show you how I'm going to create a geofence here. and then the next thing I'm going to do is create an event for that geofence, and then I'm going to create a report for that geofence. So that way you can sort of see the whole process from sort of the beginning through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to geofence here, and I'm going to, in this little drop-down arrow, I have the option here to pick a polygon. That's typically a good one to use, is this polygon option here. And I'm going to just draw this here and click and back out and call this just test. Group. New group. Save that. So I've created basically I've created a geofence here. So let's say this is, for example, it's around maybe a gas station or something. And I want to know when anyone goes into this geofence and goes to this gas station that's located in this area here. So my next step is I want to create an event rule to tell me, I want to know when someone goes into this area. So I'll go to event rule, and I'm going to add a new event rule here, and I'm going to call this inside Chevron gas station. And you could add a description. You can also decide if you want it enabled or not, so you can unenable it or enable it here. And then, again, based on, again, I'm a super user, but I see a lot of these different users, but I can decide again, this is related to those tags. So when you set up your tags and you want it to be, let's say it's just the parks vehicles here, we'll just pick on them. I haven't picked on them yet today. But again, the tags that you have associated with your groupings, that will show up in your list to who it applies to here. And again, you can say always active. So anytime I want to know when they go in, or I could set it up on a schedule. So if I click schedule, then I could pick, you know, I want it just Monday through Friday, and I want it within a certain time frame. But I'm just going to go ahead and make it always active here. Now I'm going to add my rule. So again, I've got a lot of different expressions here, but I'm going to pick geofence expression. And I'm going to pick, so again, once you set these up, so there's already one set up for go inside alarm, and there's inside, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this. I can add advanced options here, so I basically want to...
Can you say what those boxes are? We can't read them. Inside expression. So you just picked what?
So I just used the default, which is inside. So what this means is that, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to test group. So test group, sorry, that's the one that I created earlier. So test group was that geofence that I created, and then I have the option to pick inside or outside, but I want to know when vehicles go inside that test group geofence that I created earlier. And then the next one that shows is I just picked the advanced option here, and it's a rule that ends the expression. So I'm going to pick, again, the geofence, and this time I'm going to pick the test group, and I'm going to say outside. So what this does is that when the vehicle goes in, it keeps track of that. When they leave, then it stops that, basically closes that event that happens. I can set up delayed events, so I can make it immediate or I can make it delayed. So an example of delayed might be, let's say idling. You want it to, you want that event to not trigger until 5 minutes after, or but a lot of times most events you want them to trigger immediately, but the delayed event does give you the option to set up a delay for that event to trigger. And then I have my notifications here. So I have usually a key one, maybe email, but you just have to think about if you set these rules up and it's happening quite frequently, let's say speeding, for example. If you set up an email or a notification to be, every time they speed, you could be getting lots of emails. So you just may want to think about really high priority types of things that you want to be notified right away, because otherwise you start to get a lot of emails. So just keep that in mind. And then I can decide whether I want to present this. So in the case of a geofence and someone going inside, you may or may not want to, because what that's going to do is it's going to put an icon on the map to display. Just because you don't have a presentation here doesn't mean you can't see that on the map, because you can run a report and you can see that. But what this does is it actually it does put an icon on the map, and then typically by default you want it to close. You want it to be close automatically when it's finished. So in other words, it's still there as historical information that you can get to, but otherwise if you put close manually, then you have to go in and actually close it, close that event manually. So just something to think about in terms of the events and how they display on the map. You can color code it based on the color. You can set custom icons. You can use the default icon, which would be red, or say if you want to pick, you could change it to a custom icon if you wanted to as well. So we'll just leave the default. You could also put a label on there, so you could label that. And then this down here, this notification area. So if you notice down below in the lower right-hand corner, you can decide whether you want that to be enabled to actually display a number down here. So if you check this enable, then it's going to have a little, based on the color code that you have here, it'll say a number down below here that notifies you that there's an event occurring as well. We'll just go ahead and just go next and save. So okay, so that's the event role. So now we have inside Chevron gas station is the event role. So we created a geofence. We created an event role that we basically anytime a vehicle goes inside that gas station area, I'm going to keep track of that. And then the last part is I want to be able to now create a report based on that. So if I go up to manage reports, we have sort of this list of reports here, but there's a lot of additional reports that we can use. But typically, the event rule report is a key template that we can use. So when you pick that, you pick this is basically the template or the definition, and then you open that. So by opening this then gives you the ability to configure, basically create the report specifically to your needs. So we can call this inside Chevron area reports. And then we could say all parks. So this is basically sort of a subtitle here. you can decide on the format that you want this. So this doesn't necessarily have to be HTML, but it could be a CSV, a PDF, different formats here. You can pick the time period that you want. So let's say I just wanted it as a weekly report. My event role, so as you recall, I created an event role called Inside Geofence Gas Station. So the nice thing about this event role, or this event role template, is you could decide, you could combine event roles too. So I want to know not only inside, when they go inside, but I want to know the idling inside. Or so you can combine event roles into the report as well. And then I want to say who this is associated with. So, so again, I want to say my parks vehicles here, so only parks vehicles. So again, that goes back to the tags that you're creating that you want to run these reports on. And then, after you, typically you don't want to schedule the report until you've actually reviewed it, make sure it's how you want it. But once you've got it to how you like it, then you can set it up on a schedule, and you can decide, you know, what day of the week. It could be all the days of the week that you get the report. You know, which day? Let's say it's every Monday at 6 a.m. So again, going back to the tags, what I talked about earlier is tags with users. These tags are where you can define who gets these reports, for example. So we talked about the test user. We created that tag for the test user. Maybe this person or this supervisor is the person that gets this specific report, for example. And then I can save that. And now in my drop-down menu, I now have a inside Chevron area report. Of course, there's probably no vehicles that have gone through, but it brings up here, and then I can generate that report, and then it'll have all of the, you know, basically who went inside and how much time. So when they arrived in there, the duration they spent, when they departed, that would all be part of that report. I think we have about 6 minutes left here. I want to make sure we have enough time for questions, and we can get into a little bit more geofences or points of interest, but I want to make sure everybody has their questions answered here.
Maybe I'm not tracking, but I thought it went till 10 Pacific time. But again, I could be wrong.
Let's see. So we started at 9. So started at 9 a.m.
Donna, can you confirm?
It's 10:30. So we had an hour and a half. We started I think we started at 8, and it's should be almost 9:30 for you right now.
Yeah, we just have it as 8 to 10 on our calendar, I think.
Oh. Yeah, that was the invite that you sent to us was for 2 hours.
Oh. Okay.
So you have half an hour.
Okay. All right. Well, I do want to make sure, you know, we've covered a lot of information. I want to make sure, let me ask questions, and then we can get into some more detail here. So, anybody have any questions?
I think this is Nora. I think that folks would like to see you know, when the sensor is on or off. So we have the lawnmower that has that, how to run a report on that, and then also we have that sweeper at the airport that are configured. So okay. I don't know if in the interface it shows a different color or anything, but just being able to know and troubleshoot, like for example, if the lawnmower, we think it's mowing, but you know, it's not. How can we troubleshoot that earlier on?
Okay.
Rhett, April 4th and 5th are a good demonstration of that for the mower.
Okay, perfect.
If you look at the tracks for April 4th and April 5th, you'll see very clearly
okay, sorry, is the mower in roads, or is it parks?
I think it's in parks.
Yeah, parks.
Okay, and
It's the EPMR 69 is the mower, I believe.
okay. So and sorry, which day was that you mentioned?
April 4th to show it mowing. You have to change your start date.
All right, let me. I'm just going to delete this geofence here. Okay, so April 4th. Okay, so
Actually, I'm sorry, it's April 3rd and April 4th, not April 4th and April 5th. So this is the day that it wasn't mowing. April 3rd is the day it was mowing.
okay.
So that really looks like it should be mowing, right, Kathy?
Yeah, I know. It looks like it should be, but if you look at if you symbolize the tracks.
So, did you cover this advanced filter option, Jay?
Yes, but very briefly.
Okay. So, advanced filter gives you the ability to show where things are either plowing or sweeping or mowing based on
I'm sorry, how did you get to advanced filter?
Yeah, so the first thing you do is you come up here, you draw the tracks. So you've drawn the tracks, so that gives you the sort of what's been drawn. Then to get to the details, you go to track points. So again, track points, this is where the thing that I usually like to do when I'm looking, I want to see information as I turn on the specific thing. And again, this goes back to what we talked about with regards to workspaces. So workspaces, if you're, with yourself, if you're in the Parks Department, you may want to have, for example, the mower on field showing and then save your workspace. I'm actually going to turn off this Alt option here. So you're not having to turn those on all the time. Once you save your workspace, then that field will always be there for you. But if you notice, there's a mower on _ false, and then there's a mower on _ true. So what that means is that the true is where it's actually triggering that. So in the case of the blade going down, this could be the same thing with a sweeper. Of course, it's a different. A sweeper is a different option here to choose from. But so in this case, it would be broom down would be the sweeper option here. But it's the same concept. It would be broom down true or broom down false. So that's typically what I like to do is add the field here. But then if you want it sort of to visually display, what you can do is you can come up here and go, what this does is there's a little drop-down menu here, this little arrow, and there's advanced filter. And this advanced filter gives me the option to choose time, speed, other things. But the key thing here is filter based on, and I'm going to pick my mower option here. And you just apply that filter. So that you can apply that filter, and what that does is it basically filters down just to where the mower has been actually down. And then I can, oops, sorry, I clicked the wrong one there. Click, say redraw this. Okay, so Jay, maybe you can, is that a reverse there?
Yeah, that's the day that it's reversed. So if you look at, go back to your tracks day, and now look at the 4th. And draw your tracks, and that's, maybe it's the, go back a couple more days in your search. But I know there's one day where it's all mowing.
Okay. Go back further, you mean, than April?
Yeah, go back further.
Go all the way back.
So look, oh, it's March, look at March 30th. There you go. Sorry, I got my days mixed up.
So maybe while we were on that, can you explain the reversal? Is that what we were?
I've asked a couple of times, and no, it's when Mike was up on site, the guy said that sometimes they use that tractor to tow, like a aerator or a fertilizer or waterer, and that's what it might be. That they were towing another piece of equipment around.
Okay, so if I click anywhere here, if you notice the label here has true mower on in this, it looks like a baseball field. And then typically where it's a lighter color, that's where it's false. And so if you go in to either look at, say, street sweeping or something, and you find that what you saw was a reverse, what that means is that we just need to change the inputs to be able to, so it can easily be corrected, so to speak, because the inputs are based on the wires, and then what we do is we set up, there's what would you say, Jay? It's like a code. So our event code defines, when the blade is down or up, or whether a PTO is on or off.
This is a two-step process. The first step is that the device sends a integer value with every time the device reports a new track point. With the track point information, it includes an integer value that says whether the mower is on or off. Then, and this is pretty advanced stuff, but then what the server does is the server uses that integer value to set the value of the flag, the true-false flag. And then we use the true-false flag. If you open up that event, Rhett.
Yeah, so this is the mowing event that is here where
and scroll down to expressions. So you see the event is based on that 1-0 value that gets sent with every track point. We can only symbolize on a true-false though. So the event is based on the raw integer value that the device sends. The filter is actually based on a calculated true-false flag. So, Rhett, if you go over to your track points tab and add that input for state value to your track points tab.
Yeah. I think this is all helpful, but we might be getting a little off track. I think the biggest thing is we just need to work with Parks and any of our other customers that are doing inputs to make sure that they're tracking the way they're expecting. So we can cover that, I think, offline if that's okay.
Okay. Sorry, but
that's okay.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure that people could see it.
And particularly during the pilot, it's going to be very important that the managers that are responsible for the equipment where we have these flags, take a look, use this filter and take a look, and if the results aren't what they're expecting, like if you go back to that April 3rd day, if the results aren't what they were expecting because they think it should be mowing that whole other field, then that's critical for us to know so that we can look into what's going on.
Can I ask a quick question? Easy one, I think, about our trailer.
Sure.
It's CT008. So for folks that aren't familiar, this is the battery unit that sits on the trailer, and it's only in use, or it's tracking when the tractor is on pulling it. And if you just pick any day, I noticed that it has a start time that doesn't really match when the trailer started. So I'm guessing it's like, for lack of a better term, pinging at certain intervals? Is that what's happening? I looked one day and saw it started at 2:48 a.m. and I guarantee you there's nobody working at 2:48 a.m.
If you can send me this, who is this talking? I'm sorry, I can't hear voices.
It's Lisa. Hi.
Hi, Lisa. If you can send me, I think that would be better, something for me to look at offline.
Okay.
So if you can send me the day that you noticed that, please.
Okay.
This is Jay Florey.
Okay, thanks,
So
Jay.
just email me the specifics and I'll look into it and get back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So any other specific questions? Oh, you wanted to look at the sweeper as well?
Well, I think it's okay to not look at it, but I think for the benefit of everyone, I think showing, like, I think a big thing we're going to do is look at metrics overall. So we're going to say, how long was it mowing last week, or how long was it mowing this park? So using a report to show the sensor inputs, I think, would be interesting, unless anyone feels like they don't want to see that. But Kathy, if I'm overstepping here, you just let me know. If she's still on.
So, and the sweeper, for example, would be the airport SW3.
Sure.
Oh, let me turn off the. Let's look at room down, apply. So, I think let's look at, let's just look at this first and work our way back. So, obviously when you set up, each individual is going to have their own workspace. So, airport's probably not going to be looking at the mower. They're going to be looking at the room down information here and have it in their workspace, but turn that on. While we're on this topic, I don't know, Jay, have we set up an event rule for capturing the sweeping yet? Do you know?
Yes, it was set up on Friday. Called Sweeping Any Broom. Or it should have been set up on Friday.
So maybe we can walk through how that's done here. So
okay.
Let's go back to our event rule. Let's go sweeping. Sweeper down. And we go airport. Expression. So Jay, remind me, is this the analog or digital?
Digital. This will be digital expression, Rhett. And you set it for broom down equal broom down through.
So as you notice, there's a lot of different types, whether it be power takeoff. This is just that one. Again, there's these expressions between the analog and digital. This is where we set all these up for you based on whether it be broom down or plow down or PTO. That's how you set this up. So do we Jay, do we typically add a closing one here then too?
No, as soon as group, you don't need a closing. If it's a single value and okay, Rhett, can you right-click on the sweeper user for me, please? Look at the user configuration. Edit user. Okay, I think I know what the issue is. Give me just a second here.
So while we're waiting, does anybody have any questions with regards to these event rules and how it's tied to getting information such as sweeping or plowing or mowing?
Anyone in roads have any question about it?
So as you can see, these are fairly configurable. So what we recommend is that if you want to do something, what we can do is we can set up a time to actually create, basically if you define your business rules of we want PTO or we want, we can get online and basically assist you initially to get these things set up for you the way you want them to be set up. We realize that this is sort of a lot of information to take in initially, but once you go through and do a few specific, again, business rules that you want to set up, we can go through and help you through the process of creating this, and then again, it's the event rules first, and then the report is sort of the second thing after you create the event rule. So, does anybody else have any other questions? Specific things while we're waiting for?
A lot of people have X's next to their computer icon, and I just want to make sure that that doesn't mean they're not there. So if you look at all the icons, they all have X's. I just don't know what that means.
Oh, mine has the X. I'm hoping that just means I have my phone muted.
Oh, okay. Just checking. So like,
Yeah, that's exactly. The little X means that they've muted their phones. So it looks like some people are on computers that are, but then there's also the little phones are also still open here. So.
Okay, that's good, because some people were messaging me saying that they got knocked off the call somehow. So no big deal.
So, how's it going, Jay?
Give me a couple minutes, more minutes.
All right. So, did in the user training, were you able to create points of interest or geofences? Are there specific geofences or points of interest that each department is interested in creating, or have you?
I did. I walked through the process. I didn't create any real ones, though. So if anybody has any real geofences, I did create one real geofence. If you go to your geofence tab, you'll see there's a group called Sweeper Dump Sites, and that was at the request of the King County Airfield folks. Wanted to know how much time their sweeper was spending dumping material, and so I created that little dump site geofence, and I created an inside geofence report. So that was
Is it possible? sorry. One business case we had that was in part of the RFP is the possibility of calculating average trip time. So like if we had a geofence around the landfill and a geofence around one of our transfer stations, and I'm not sure what type of geofence would be best, could we then, regardless of whether the engine was turned on or off, that would be our trip. There is one leg and back is the other leg. And then could we build an expression to calculate average trip time over a period of time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't know that we have enough time today to show you that on the fly,
Right.
but yes, that is something we could do.
Yeah, and it could
Excellent.
be, it could either be a geofence or it could be a point of interest as well. So, and that's how these trip reports are set up, is based on the specific event rule for those. As an example would be stops at known locations and trips. So the combination of these three right here are related to showing you the trips and then the stops. So you can go from one location to a next and it calculates that, and then we can, as Jay mentioned, we can do averages and other things as well. But you can use these as an example and then create additional ones. So if we bring up, for example, stops at known locations, these are, right now there's not a category because you don't have points of interest, but this could either be a geofence or it could be a point of interest. And anytime, if it's a point of interest, 98 yards, for example, within that area, it will calculate when it arrived, when it departs, and then when it leaves, and goes, and then again, that's it captures the amount of time that they spent. And I don't know if Jay talked about this, but the difference between a known location is one that we're actually bringing into the system like a point of interest, and then unknown locations are basically anytime a vehicle stops, it's going to get an address, but it's not going to, you know, if we import information, it's going to get the specific name, like maybe a business name or a department or something like that.
Thank you. And for the
Rhett,
benefit of
go...
everyone, what's the difference between a geofence and a point of interest? When would you use one versus the other?
Yeah, so the geofence is a really specific area. So usually, especially if it's an odd shape, like around a maybe a yard or maybe the airport or maybe a city boundary, it's usually larger areas. Points of interest are, the nice thing about points of interest is that you can, if you have a spreadsheet of addresses of, let's say, all of the fuel stations, you could just import those in and then just calculate, again, the radius that the vehicle gets to that location and then departs. It's basically kind of the same concept. It's just with a geofence, you're getting really accurate around a boundary. It's, it's obviously an area, versus a point is just a point location, and then you can actually define the radius at which a vehicle goes within that location. So, they're basically, you can do sort of the same sort of things. It's just typically a geofence, you can get real accurate, when they go into a specific area. Let's say even if they leave an area, like let's say the county boundary or anything like that, you want to know when they go outside. That's where you would use, a geofence might be good for obviously leaving an area or going into a large area versus a point of interest. And so both are really useful. It's just kind of depends on the specific, when you look at the place you're looking at, is it a large sort of odd area where the radius wouldn't really help because it's maybe it's an odd shape, and so that wouldn't necessarily work versus actually drawing a boundary or something like that. So Jay, how's that going with?
If you look at the 20th, the flag is there now. So if you look at tracks for the 20th, and filter on it, you can see. And now that I look at this with a satellite, I think my dump site is probably 1 block south of where it needs to be.
Okay, so you're saying you already have it set up in here?
Yeah, so if you go filter, there it is. So you can see now that broom down is populated with false and true. And one of the things that I did, and again, this is pretty advanced, but just so you know, you can always go in. We have the ability to reprocess tracks. So if there's an event that you create or some additional processing that you wanted to do based on track point information, we can set it up for you, and then assuming that the device was sending the values that we're interpreting, we can actually go back and reprocess the tracks and fill in the information. So this is what I did here. After I created the flag value, I went back and I reprocessed the tracks from the 19th and the 20th, and now that information is available for use. So there's a lot of flexibility because of the way we store the track points. There's a lot of ability to go back and reprocess the track points from a week ago to gain new knowledge. So as your managers are working with the information, if there's something that they're not capturing, they want to start capturing, we can go back and get it for them. And
so
there
real quick,
you
Jay,
see,
Jay, this looks to me like this is being swept here.
exactly. That's why it's. All right.
Camera.
I'll have to look at.
The broom down right there though, so there's no gutters. They just have the vacuum move.
I'm sorry?
So I know the guy that was sweeping. I was actually talking to him about that just the other day.
Okay.
The gutter brooms are not down in there because there's no gutters. It does no good. It's just the vacuum head that's down sucking stuff up.
This is.
Hey, you're cutting out.
Is that broom down or the vacuum mode on? Like with the little bit.
Got some cutout here.
Is this any? Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, you were cutting out, Jay. I couldn't hear you. Try again.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what else I can do. I went onto the handset, but we're actually track vacuum motor, the pony engine. So unless he was driving around without the pony engine on, we should have gotten tracks for that day. So what's going on there?
We'll touch base on that one
Hello?
later. It's just hard to hear, I think.
Yeah, we were getting some cutout there. So let's, if we could follow up with what specifically you're needing there, we can make sure that it's capturing the right information. So, okay, well, we have 5 minutes left. Is there any other questions, kind of general questions here? And so we can have some follow-ups specifically with each group too, if there's interest in, the sweeper or the mower. The easiest thing for us to do is just get online with your, specific department and work through either what you're seeing, or if there's a report that we're needing, we can work through that together as a group, within that group, I should say.